Brilliant. So we'll get started now. So yeah, thank you everyone for joining. If you can just make sure that you are on mute, which is fantastic. So yeah, so thank you everyone for joining us this afternoon. Some of you may have already joined us this morning as part of our security day today. My name is Chloe Mustafa. I'm the marketing manager here with Cobweb, and today I'm joined by Juan and Damon from Acronis. So today's webinar is all about looking at some of the ways in which you can further protect your business, especially looking at some of the security elements and sort of the cyber risks that are out there today as a result of remote working, COVID-19, and the sort of world that we're in at the moment. So I'm going to pass you over to Juan, who's going to kickstart everything today with us.
Fantastic. Thank you, Chloe. Much appreciated. Thanks for everyone for taking some time to join us. Just to make my introduction, I'm the strategic account manager here at Acronis that has the pleasure of looking after our friends at Cobweb. So what I'm going to do is spend no more than a few minutes giving you a little bit of background on Acronis, where we've come from and the direction that we're on. And then I'll hand you over to my colleague, Damon, who can give you a little look under the hood, so to speak, at the cyber platform and some of the services that we offer via Cobweb. So some of you won't know who Acronis are, or if you do, maybe you've not engaged with us for a little while. So by way of a refresher for you, we were founded actually in 2003 in Singapore, and we opened our second headquarters in Switzerland, Schaffhausen in Switzerland, in 2008.
Is now joining.
Now, ordinarily, that's a kind of a mildly interesting point of conversation, but just recently it's become a crucial data point. In actual fact, you know, for many years we've spoken about networks having redundancy and so forth. We as an organisation effectively have redundancy in our headquarters, and that's proven to be hugely advantageous in the current climate, and that's really given us a great advantage. It won't surprise you at all to see some of the growth figures that we're enjoying, and that's mainly as you know, the cloudification of business, as folks move to the cloud and have less resource that they need to manage themselves on premise. And we've seen huge amounts of growth in our cloud business in particular. And that's given us a global reach or a global presence of some 33 locations. And we have customers in over 150 countries with in 40 different languages we transact. The employee count of 1,500 is interesting. When I joined just a touch over a year ago, that was around the 1,000 mark. So we've grown fairly considerably, and an awful lot, in fact, most of that growth is in R&D and support and technical innovation and things of that nature. We're very much a technically led organization, and that's why we work so closely with folks like Cobweb in bringing our solution to market. Just stepping back to the global reach column there, we enjoy 100% of Fortune 100 customers, or presence within Fortune 1000 customers, I should say. And that's across the range of different products and services. But perhaps most interestingly, people will often ask and wonder why we make light of the 5.5 million prosumers, or end users, if you like, of our product. And as you look today, and as you learn today a little bit about what we do, you'll find an awful lot of what we do is AI-based machine learning, cognitive analytics, that sort of thing. And all of the richness of patterns of modeling and learning that we get from our prosumers directly affects and benefits our business customers. So so that's worth noting. You may know us, if you do know us previously, around as a disaster, as a backup and a DR company. We're now so much more than that. Everything you'll see from us as we move forward is very much talking about cybersecurity and cyber protection. And there's a very good reason for that. It used to be that data resided just within a network or within a single location. The amount of devices that would hold data and were of importance were limited. Typically, I remember some time ago, I'd have a laptop and maybe that was about it. But now data and the complexity of data has grown exponentially. Data is found on your fridge, on your phone, in your car. The amount of locations with home working, and that has certainly changed and grown over the recent weeks, has meant that complexity and cost has grown and become more significant and will continue to do so. The security of data has become more difficult with issues around ransomware and exploitation and malware and things of that nature. We've seen stats, we've seen news reports almost daily of the issues around that, be that punitive fines for breaches or even companies losing the ability to trade and the costs thereof. So data has become wonderfully complex, wonderfully costly, difficult to manage, and it's actually become, with the value of data, it's more valuable than gold or oil or anything else. It's become effectively a fifth basic need to manage and control and keep secure individuals' data and the data of organizations. So what we have at Acronis is a suite of products that really caters for the needs of all businesses of all sizes, the needs of cyber protection. And we have the acronym you may have seen and you'll certainly receive as and when you work closer with us of SAPAS. And that talks about the safety, accessibility, the privacy, the authenticity and security of data and what have you. And really what that means is any viable solution in this space really needs to balance those 5 vectors, if you like. Now, to use a ridiculous example, if the most secure data would be put in a lead-lined box and buried underground, right? No one could access that. It would be extremely safe. But of course, it wouldn't be accessible. So how do you make something accessible from anywhere by any authorized person and yet make it safe, make it secure, make it private? Again, I hope today you'll see a glimpse of how we're balancing these 5 vectors and allowing you to meet all of them in your security and control of data. What we've launched recently is our Cyber Protect product, and again, without wanting to go into this in too much detail, it's balancing these 5 needs. The need for proactive protection, so reactive protection is not good enough. Closing the stable door once the horse has bolted is not an effective mechanism for your organizations, I would suggest. So that active protection against malware and defending against viruses and what have you is absolutely crucial. We are able to use blockchain type technologies to notarize and ensure the authenticity of files and what have you, and we ensure cyber privacy. So I'm just pulling back a little bit to what or where you may have known us from. A component of our suite, and something we'll certainly touch on today, and we're certainly not shying away from, is the backup and disaster recovery element of our product. And to remind you, if you've not seen this for a little while, and perhaps to highlight one of the key reasons why people are coming to us en masse, is the sheer breadth of the amount of workloads, the platforms that we are able to service from a single console. Very often we'll go and speak to customers, service providers and end customers, and they will be looking at 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 different backup vendors, let alone cybersecurity vendors, to manage their data. And the reason is often the same. They have different environments, different platforms, different workstations in terms of Mac and so OS and Windows. And they need different vendors to be able to manage that. So in short, a very powerful USP for us at Acronis is our ability to manage and secure and back up from data across multiple locations. We support all of these environments and more, and that it really does give you that single pane of glass, that one throat to choke, so to speak. And that's something we're very, very proud of. Away from technology, we are very proud of some of the CyberFit initiatives that we support, and it would be amiss of me not to mention them. Most notably, perhaps, and the one where you may have seen us before is the one in the middle here, our CyberFit sports partnerships. We partner with more than 80 sports teams across the globe. In the UK, that's F1 teams like Williams and Racing Point. I think there'll be Aston Martin Racing when the season finally begins again. Arsenal, Liverpool, Manchester City, and various other sports. And we're very careful and we're very proud not to talk about that as sponsorship, because it isn't. It's true partnership. These organizations are using our technology not just to secure their data, as you would suggest, but really using those AI engines that I touched on to work on analytics of player movement, for example, and a bunch of other different things. So again, once you engage with us here at Acronis and we can work with our friends at Cobweb, we can really give you some insight into some other initiatives that we're working with to help vulnerable children, for example, to work within sports environments and various other initiatives. Now, I feel like I've spoken for way too long. So I'm going to hand over to my colleague, Damon Giddings, who's going to, as I say, give you a little glimpse under the hood of what we can do and how we do it. And then at the end, we'll open up for some more questions.
Thank you, Juan. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm just going to run through. I think we've got some feedback. Is that you, Juan? Yeah. Good afternoon, everybody. What I'm going to do this afternoon is take you through one of our core technologies. It's called CyberCloud. So I'm just about to share my screen with you all. And hopefully you can see a browser. And the technology we're going to be looking at is something called CyberCloud. We've had another big release of the platform as of this week, and that's added some extra functionality, which I'll also cover. But that specifically relates to cyber protection technologies such as anti-malware, vulnerability assessment, patch management, URL filtering, that kind of thing. So that's on top of our traditional technologies of backup and disaster recovery. But what I'm going to do first is tell you a little bit about the platform itself. What we're going to do is go through what is a single pane of glass solution with two distinct areas, but essentially it's a single pane of glass solution. It's hosted by Acronis in the Acronis cloud. And all we need to do to access that platform is just go to a browser at this URL and just type in our credentials. It's worth noting as well at this stage, whilst I'm not using it for this demonstration, we do have two-factor authentication available on the platform. And the beauty of that is, of course, it further heightens the security of the platform. All we do is leverage Microsoft and Google Authenticator apps to achieve that. So it's a very straightforward technology to utilize. So I mentioned it's a single pane of glass, but there are kind of two distinct areas when we're talking about backup and disaster recovery in particular. We have a management console here, but we also have a console, and it's just a shortcut away from the dashboard into the console where we can control our backups, disaster recovery, and if we're talking about our latest version, CyberProtect, the cyber protection options, we can also configure antivirus and the anti-malware and so on within that console as well. But I'm going to spend just a few short minutes just talking about what we're looking at now. And what we are actually looking at is essentially what we call in the Acronis ecosphere tenants, and these tenants are customers. They can be end customers, or they can be partners. The two distinctions, or the distinction is between the two, is that a customer is very much an end user, so they have access to a management console and they can manage their users and reporting and so on. But if you're a partner, basically you can provision other tenants for your own customers, your own resellers, and your own partners. So it's very much a hierarchical platform. But for the purpose of today, what I'm going to quickly do is just show you how we can add a new client to this console. All I need to do is go up to here, new, and I've got three choices. A folder is a logical unit. So when I say logical unit, what do I mean? I referred to tenants over here. All this means is that if we're talking about a client or somebody has multiple sites and wants to segregate those within one account, they can do. So you create a folder and all the workloads, whatever they may be, whether it's Office 365, whether it's on-premise or whether it's virtual environments, can all be contained in that one folder. And alternatively, if you have another address, you can also contain all of the IT estate in that location, in that folder as well. And we also have partner and customer. Customer is the end user, that's nice and easy. Partner, I'll quickly run through, but I won't commit to it. But what I will do thereafter is create a customer from scratch and just show you how easy it is. And on the back of that, how easy it is to deploy an Office 365 environment as well in terms of backup. So quickly, just how to configure a partner. It's useful. I'm just going to quickly type in test. We have the option here. This would be the partner's name, the language. You've got a choice of languages. Next, we have options here to configure what we can actually enable for this partner. So I'm assuming that this is a partner account. This partner, I can dictate what that partner actually can sell. We have 6 editions of our core product, which is CyberCloud. Here it is Cyber Backup. We have a standard edition, which is for small businesses, maybe up to 5 or 10 workloads. Then we have an advanced edition that gives you extra functionality, such as clustering, support for Exchange and SQL, and some other sort of management functionality. And we have our Disaster Recovery Edition. The Disaster Recovery Edition allows you to take an entire machine backup and run it in our cloud as a workload. And you can do that over a layer 2 VPN connection that you can also download from the console. So again, in terms of deployment from a Disaster Recovery Edition, it's very, very straightforward indeed to deploy disaster recovery workloads. But we also have another 3 editions here. And I mentioned this is our new solution. And these 3 editions are, from a backup and disaster recovery perspective, are a mirror image of these. It just gives you cyber protection capabilities embedded within these 3 as well. So that's anti-malware, vulnerability assessment, patch management, that kind of thing. Also, I can choose whether I want to enable file sync and share for our platform. Now, this is essentially the Acronis version of Dropbox, but I'm not going to dwell on that too much today. We don't have that kind of time, unfortunately. Cyber infrastructure. Now, this is another Acronis technology. It's Linux-based, but it's basically a scale-out storage. It enables you to be able to scale out storage clusters using proprietary technology such as Dell, HP. Doesn't matter. Is vendor agnostic. But the beauty of it, it can be very much a mix and match scenario from a hardware perspective, and it just enables you to build out a very robust storage cluster. Physical data shipping. This is for shipping large amounts of data. So we're talking about terabytes when your uplinks aren't that good and you need to get that data to a data center quickly and synced with the cloud storage, and then you can commence your backups. And this can be as large as you want. It can be terabytes and terabytes, and it's just a question of running the initial backup onto a hard disk. Notary, last of all, again, I'll quickly touch on this. Notary is our technology whereby you can digitally fingerprint your data and then distribute that fingerprint throughout the Ethereum blockchain. And where this has a particular use case is very much in the legal field, for example, where you're talking about contracts, and you can then, should someone come back at a later date and contest that particular contract, say that it may have artificially changed it, what you can do is take that document that they've supplied and verify it in the console. So we have a drag and drop facility. So you drag and drop the initial document into that console. It creates a fingerprint. At a later date, if you want to validate a document that someone has sent you that they claim to be the original, you can just do the same thing, drag and drop that document into the console, and it will validate whether that's an authentic file or not. It doesn't matter how insignificant or how small the change may be, the notary will identify that. And lastly, we can configure the options. As you can see, there's many options here that you can configure for a partner or an end user. So the principle is the same, whether it's a partner or an end user. With a partner, we can configure all of the editions. If this was an end user, I would have specified in step 2 that this user was going to use either standard edition, for example, or advanced edition, and I would be able to determine what I wanted to make available to that customer. But from a partner perspective or customer perspective, it's quite straightforward. If, for example, I just had somebody who was, for example, either using or selling G Suite and Office 365 and mobile devices, I could just disable everything else just by deselecting them. So it's very, very straightforward indeed to deploy a customer. So I'm going to close that. I'm not going to proceed any further with that one. What I will do is create a customer, show you how to create a customer from scratch. We'll add an Office 365 account and we will go from there. So if I just call this Office 365, that's basically the customer name. I've got an option here basically to enable a trial or production. A trial basically will give this customer that I'm creating 30 days to play around with the platform as much as they want and see whether it's a good fit for them or not. And after that 30 days, the trial either drops dead, it stops, the data will still be there, so it could be re-enabled at a later date, or you can just switch it straight to production if that client were to proceed with you, or you as an end user decided to run with the solution. So here we go. So this is the options I've got to create for this customer. I'm not interested in any of these other technologies I ran through on the previous screen. I'm only interested in cyber protection. But I also want cyber
is now exiting.
Cyber protection and disaster recovery. So I'm going to select that addition there, click next, and basically I can also determine what I want to give to this customer. Here we go. I'll keep all the defaults, click next, and I will create this customer here. And I just need to pop in an email address here. For speed, I will skip name and last name. Okay, there we are, that's in use. Okay, so this is now going to send an activation email to this customer, and then I will be able to log in and I'll be able to add my Office 365 account. So all I do is go to my inbox here. As you can see, I've got an email, click on Activate Account. I need to create a password. If I'd enabled in the options two-factor authentication, it would now prompt me for my Google or Microsoft credentials as well to create two-factor authentication. I have to agree to the terms. And there we are. Basically, what we have now is a completely new customer. And what it's done is it's popped me into the backup console. So this is a good way of going through the backup console now on disaster recovery console. So automatically what it's doing is it's prompting me, it's telling me that as a vanilla, it's a completely unique and new console. What do I want to add? Ordinarily, I'll just click on that. However, I want to show you how we would add a device ordinarily. But just a quick orientation of the console. This is where we, as I said, we control our backups and disaster recovery elements. We have all sorts of information that will be displayed here, and I'll cover that off afterwards in another tenant that's in production. Devices, so if I had any devices, they'd be listed here, so that could be machines, and also under here we'd have listed cloud applications. So what I'm going to do first is under devices, if I click on add, so I want to add a device, I've got a choice of workstations, that's Windows and Macs, servers, Windows and Linux, mobile devices, that's OIS and Android, and that's both mobile phones and also tablets that you can protect. Virtualization hosts, all the usual suspects here. We have agentless technologies for VMware and Hyper-V in particular. The rest are agent-based, but these two will enable you to deploy an agent on one workload, either the Hyper-V host or with VMware we have a small appliance, and that will enable you to, in the case of VMware, leveraging vCenter, it will identify all of the workloads in your environment and you can basically back them up. It will automatically add them to the console for you. And the same for Hyper-V. Applications, the usual suspects are here. So we've got SQL Exchange and Active Directory, Oracle as well, SAP HANA in as well we have support for, and the usual suspects of Office 365 and G Suite as well. So all I'm going to do is click on Office 365, Office 365 worldwide. And I need to add a global admin user here. which I will add here. Click on next. I just need to pop in my password. And sign in. And what this will do is this will take me to a permissions page. So this is just giving Acronis permission to obviously read and write all groups and so on. So we can basically read the data from the Office 365 environment. And at this point, what we are doing is, whilst I've entered my password details there, what I've done is using open authentication and a token-based system, going forwards, it won't utilize the password and username. It's just going to, so even if that password should change for that global admin, it will ensure that the account remains synced. So that's the joy of open authentication. As we can see, it's registered the account. So all I need to do now is go back and refresh under Office 365, and here we go. So all of this has been populated from an Office 365 perspective. Now, what we have here are groups, email groups, we have public folders, we have SharePoint, so we have site collections, and also we have users. So these, from a user, I'll focus on the user's perspective for the benefit of the demo. All I need to do is click on here, and as we can see, all of the users in my Office 365 account have been populated here. So I can now determine how I want to protect these. So obviously what we're looking for from a user perspective is to make sure that we've got their OneDrive content and also their mailboxes. So with that, I have two choices. I can click on a group backup, or I can select an individual user and back them up individually. So if I've got a big Office 365 account, or indeed a small one, and I just want to be selective about the users that I want to protect, I can just cherry pick them if I wish. However, the real pain saver here is doing a group backup. And a group backup literally will identify any new additions or removals to the account and adjust the protection accordingly. So the first option I've got is I'm going to protect the Office 365 mailboxes. So I can do that to cloud storage. By default, it's the Acronis cloud. However, through partners, it can be a different cloud storage as well. So it doesn't have to be Acronis cloud storage necessarily. And here I want to, I've got two choices. I've got Office 365 mailboxes or OneDrive. I'm going to stick with Office 365. I'll come back and do OneDrive in a second. Where to back up? By default, that's cloud storage. The schedule is once a day. There's a good reason for that. That stops Microsoft throttling your account from obviously ingress and egress of data from a backup perspective. So we keep it to once a day. And initially, when we're configuring this, all of these accounts will be spread out over a 24-hour period. So there'll be no backups running concurrently. Again, that stops Microsoft. You obviously getting the attention of Microsoft and them throttling your account. Retentions, this is obviously one of the killers over a standard Office 365 environment. Office 365, basically after 30 days, your data's gone in essence. And the beauty here is, of course, you can go as long as you wish. The retentions, there's no limit on retention. So there we are. I'll stick with 5 years initially. And they can be as frequent as you wish, or you can just specify, you can obviously specify by backup age or the number of backups. So if you only wanted to keep the last couple of months, you could just do 60 backups, for example. Fairly straightforward stuff. So that's my retentions. I can also specify whether I want to back up my archive mailboxes and also whether I want to encrypt the data. Now, if I click on here, I have to enter a password again. So I'll enter a password here. It is a SHA-256 hash of the password. So that's worth noting. We don't store the passwords for backups unless they are being used in disaster recovery, because our disaster recovery solution has to decrypt the encrypted backup archives to extract the image and run it in our cloud. But for the rest of the backups, we don't store the password, so it's obviously password management is key. And there's no backdoors to the backup archives as there is with some other vendors. It really is it. So there we are. And that's it. And the joy of this, of course, is once I've configured this, as you can see, if you cut out me talking, there's only a handful of options you need to configure. You click on apply, that will now go away and schedule all the backups. And I can do the same for OneDrive. So just quickly running through again, Office 365, OneDrive. Oops. There we are. Okay, I've given it a specific name, cloud storage, once a day, retention, I only want to keep it for 6 months, archive mail box, hold on, there we are, right, do that, OneDrive, didn't select OneDrive, there we are, edit that. Sorry about this, guys. There we are. Okay, giving it the correct name, OneDrive, items to backup. I can specify whether I want to filter or not. I can specify through using wildcard characters if I want to omit things like MP3s, that kind of things, or certain other files or folders. Where to back up, default again, cloud storage. Once a day is the schedule, again to avoid throttling. Monthly, 6 monthlies, and weekly 4 weeks, daily 7 days. Happy with that. And encryption, once again, I will specify encryption. Always good practice, of course, goes without saying. There we are. And there we are, and click on apply, and that has also now configured a OneDrive and Office 365 backup. Now, as you use if you were to add other accounts, Office 365 accounts, you can utilize those same backup plans. So I can leverage that, so I don't have to go through and create these every single time. And as you can see, all of these backups are scheduled now. If I have a look at Adele more closely, what I can do is say, well, this user is really important to me, so I'm going to quickly click on Run Now, and that will go away and do a Office 365 mailbox backup of Adele's inbox. And I can also specify that for other users, for example, if I do OneDrive, click on Backup, the same principle applies, scroll down, OneDrive to Cloud Storage, and click on Run Now. There we are, and it's worth noting as well, even though I've run those backup jobs, if I wanted to, these will basically run on the next frequency anyway. So as you can see, the next backup job, if I scroll across, is already penciled in for May the 6th it's done it. it's literally done it. So that was the last backup, sorry. Next backup is actually at 21:46, so that's 9:45 this evening. So it will still carry on the backup schedule, even though I've done a run now. But if I want to recover any information from this user, and it's the same whether it's SharePoint or whether it's public folders or it's group mailboxes, if I want to recover, I just click on recovery, go in there. As you can see, because I've committed this backup plan as of a few seconds ago, I've got one recovery point. It's a new account. If this was an existing account and I'd been running this for some time, I'd have lots of entries here, and they're all called recovery points. And I could basically go to any of those recovery points and recover from that point in time. Again, a luxury that you don't get in standard Office 365. So I click on recover. I've got the choice of entire mailbox. Now I can recover back this entire mailbox back to this account or another group altogether. But I can also go into a mailbox in more granular fashion. So if I click on email messages, here we go, it's prompting me. Obviously from security and compliance perspectives, it's prompting me for my password, my encryption password. There we are. Okay, and immediately, as you can see, I've got all of this represented here, and I can go into any of these in granular detail. I've even got an archive mailbox down there as well. It's got nothing in it, sadly. But if I go back to Adele's inbox, here I can see her recent emails that were backed up and protected in this backup. Now, what I can do here is if I click on this email here, for example, I can go in granular detail. I can see the contents of it. I can even download any attachments, for example, so I can save that directly to disk as well. And what I can do is I can send as an email if I wish, or I can just recover into the existing mailbox, so custom location or original location as well. So I can send as an email, so I'll quickly do that. There we are. Your email. And I click on send. And again, to avoid data slipping out of the environment from a compliance perspective, it's prompting me yet again for the encryption password. And there we are. It will basically fire that email off, and it will pop up, as we can see there, it's giving you the activity details as well. So you've got that granular record of the accounts. And if I go back to my inbox, sometime soon, it will pop up in there. Keep an eye out for that. So basically, that is how we create an Office 365 backup. If I go back here, I can also do the same for, if I pick on SharePoint, for example, here, same principle applies. All I need to do is click on here, scroll across, and I can see all the options there. And basically, I can run a backup plan for there as well. Nice and easy. So all I have to do is click on Group Backup, SharePoint sites. So I'll quickly edit the name again, nice and easy. Click on OK. Items to back up. I can specify what I want to back up, whether I want to mix files and folders. Where to back up, default again, cloud storage, once a day again. And again, I've got the only other option I've got is retentions. And I can click on encryption if I wish to, and click on apply. Obviously, if this was a real production account, I would obviously enable encryption. So that's how we protect Office 365, guys. What I'm going to do now is quickly jump out of this console I've created and just show you what a production or a closer to production version looks like. There'll be a lot more going on in terms of the reporting, obviously, as it's been more established. There we go, and jump into the console there by clicking on Cyber Protection. There we are. So this has got a lot more information going on. I'll quickly go back to the Devices tab that we saw in the previous, the new tenant I created. And as you can see here, I've got a list of workloads. So it's a mix of virtual machines and physical devices, and even a laptop, you can tell by the icon here. And just to give you a feel for some of the information that's being portrayed here, we have something called the CyberFit score. The CyberFit score on devices basically tells you where it sits in terms of its security rating. That security rating is made up by a number of different parameters, such as, is your drive encrypted? Do you have a secure VPN to obviously get into your corporate network? Do you have antivirus and anti-malware installed? Is it backed up? That kind of thing. Do you have URL filtering, basically? And that's basically how the top score of 850 is achieved. So as you can see here from some of these workloads, there's some work to be done. And indeed here, I've got some activity displayed that says suspicious activity. And what I can do is, in the interest of speed, I can just click on that. It's a link, and it'll tell me basically what device has had the suspicious activity, what the process was. And as you can see, okay, it's a ransomware simulator. But what this is telling me is that we have active protection technology, which basically uses machine learning to understand the behavior of my workload. And what it's looking for is ransomware attacks in particular. And when we say ransom attacks, what it's looking for is behavior that is not consistent with normal operation of that system. And anything, we have a list of parameters that are regarded as suspicious over and above that. And any suspicious activity that is detected, it stops the service. And in between identifying that there's a threat and stopping the service, inevitably, there will be some data encrypted. And what it's done is illustrate that these files were affected. But what it's done is it says it's reverted using cache. And what that means is that once that data was identified as encrypted and at risk, it's reverted those from cache. It caches the last few seconds of activity on the system, so it can revert it without having to resort to a backup. So that's the beauty of that particular technology. And as you can see on this particular workload, we have a user here who's not really learning the lesson that you shouldn't really click on this. It's obviously popping up several times. And if I scroll right down as well, not only to add insult to injury, they've also been clicking on dodgy malware links as well, and the URL filter has basically blocked them. And within this console as well, we can identify obviously last backup, next backup, and so on, and some other key parameters. But what I'm quickly going to show you now, it's one of the last points I'll cover from a backup perspective before I quickly tell you about disaster recovery, is that how we protect a workload is slightly different to Office 365. But I'm going to quickly run through what these icons mean as well. This enables me to create a disaster recovery server from a particular workload. This is where I click on to recover files and folders. And what I have here are 2 or 3 remote connection options, basically. So we have the option here to connect to this server via RDP or HTML5. And then the beauty of the HTML5 console is that it uses HTTPS and creates a secure connection in between this console and the remote workload. And furthermore, you can also share that particular link. So if you're talking about remote users at the moment, obviously people being distributed, you think about IT teams. If they don't have access for any reason to an environment, you can share remote connections for them via this console, or indeed they could log in and use the HTML5 console. The patch management piece here, basically this will tell me if there's any patches that I need to enable for this system. Fortunately not for me. If they did, they'd be listed. And lastly, we have details here, and this is just high level information on what this particular device has got going on, such as its IP address, its CPU, that kind of thing. So I'm going to quickly run through what a protection plan is, slightly different to Office 365. What I need to do is actually I will pick on a workload that is not protected. As we can see, it quite clearly says that this system here, what's its name, is DGI ACPPP, is not protected. Last backup, never, not scheduled. So what I'm going to do is click on here. I do have an option to add one of these protection plans I've already created. So once you've created these can be used as a template. And I can just I know it's a 2016 server, so I could just click on here and apply, but that would be the quick and easy way. For demo purposes, I'm going to create a plan from scratch, quickly run through it. And I've got a few options here quickly. I've got the option to back it up. I can enable anti-malware protection, so that's antivirus. It's a full-on malware solution, plus active protection technology in there, which is the machine learning piece that stops ransomware and crypto mining. We have URL filtering as well. URL filtering is nice, obviously stops you, especially in the case of phishing emails. This will block any blacklisted dangerous websites, and you can determine whether you want to prompt the user. So you can always ask user or just block it by default. Vulnerability assessment. The vulnerability assessment will go away and it will analyze your operating system and your Windows applications and third-party products as well. And when I say that, it's looking for any patches that should be applied to those systems. So it goes away, contacts all the vendors, and if there are any patches that need to be applied, you'll get a report, and this report will be generated on a schedule, and the schedule here is currently 1:05 only on a Monday, but you can specify the frequency. It could be every day or multiple times during the day if you wished. Patch management works really well in conjunction with vulnerability assessment. The patch management piece, basically it's looking to plug all those gaps we've identified in vulnerability assessment. And again, it's Windows third-party products, it's other third-party vendors, and it's also Microsoft operating systems. And again, you can schedule this at any time of day that you wish or frequency. And of course, the risk is with patch management is that you can get bad patches. I mean, we all know that they exist, they have done, they always will do, unfortunately. So what you can do is run a pre-update backup. So after it's, or whether you apply it manually or you run an automatic update of the patches, what you can do is run a backup before installing the software updates. And again, this is an absolute no-brainer, of course, because it just gives you the capability to roll back. So I'm going to quickly go through backup before I just finally touch on DR. The backup side of things, we've got a few choices here, as you'd expect, entire machine, disk volumes, files, folders, that good stuff. Entire machine is obviously the most sensible. If you can, obviously in certain situations, it might be more prudent for files and folders in particular, if it's a file server and you're not worried too much about the underlying OS. But entire machine just catches everything, right? It's just far easier to recover. We have something called continuous data protection as well. This is basically replicating key files and folders in real time or applications. So as I'm working on a system, so if you have an end user working on their desktop or their laptop, any applications that they're working on or files and folders can be identified or selected. And what that will enable you to do is to back these files and folders up as changes are made. So I'll select documents and settings, click on OK, and that will in real time protect those files and folders. And that can be any files and folders or any application. Where to back up? I can store my backups anywhere I wish. It can be cloud storage, it can be Acronis cloud storage, it can be Fusion storage, it can be local storage, it doesn't matter. You can specify anything there. Schedule as frequent or as infrequent as you wish from a scheduling perspective. It can be monthlies, weeklies, dailies. It really doesn't matter. You can specify start parameters when you want it to start, even within certain date ranges. And from end users perspective or endpoint in particular, especially if we're talking about laptops, you can specify to say battery power, don't start on meter connections, all that kind of stuff. So lots of options there as well. How long to keep? Retention's the same as in Office 365. There's no limit. There's no limit. And certainly you can reduce it down to 1 or 2, but there's no limit ultimately. Encryption, again, same principle applies. We've got the option of 128.192.256 AES encryption. Application backup. I talked about application backup at the beginning. It's just simply a case of enabling this. So you've got Microsoft SQL Server. For example, if I did that and enabled this and clicked OK, and this was a SQL Server, it would go away. It would validate that there's a database there, and furthermore, that the credentials worked with that database as well. And then what that will do as part of the backup, assuming you need it, you've got options in there, but options such as being able to truncate the logs, which obviously keeps your backups nice and tidy at the end. Lastly, from a backup perspective, there's lots of parameters here, and I won't go through all of them. We've got compression levels, we've got performance metrics that you can dictate how much resource is used, but you can also specify from a cyber protection perspective forensic options. And what this enables you to do, in the event of a endpoint or any kind of device having a horrible shutdown, it's launched itself, it's suffered a ransomware or some sort of malware attack, you can basically extract this information from the backup as well. And furthermore, it's notarized as well. So this is leveraging our notarized technology. So if, for example, there's a police case and that device has been retained as evidence, you can demonstrate that the actual report and information is authentic. So that's backup. Anti-malware protection, I'll quickly zip through this. It's fairly straightforward. Active protection, ransomware technology, again, that's just going to revert using cache. The behavior engine, basically behavior engine is real-time machine learning, basically looking for threats that are occurring on your system. Self-protection stops any outside threats, basically disabling the service that protects your system and interfering registry entries or backups. We have network folder protection as well, so that'll protect you from all threats, malware, antivirus, and so on. Oh, it's jumped. Bear with me 1 second, guys. My console's just refreshed. Hold on. This is as much as anything to do with my internet connection, I'm afraid, today. We did have a joke about this before the session started, and it looks as though that cursor's just hit me. I'll see if I can refresh it. But in the meantime, the other options that we've got in there from the anti-malware solution perspective, hold on, I'm going to try a different browser. I'll quickly log in as a different browser and see how we go.
I was going to say, Damon, whilst you're trying to sort out your demo, I mean, it's not a live demo unless something goes wrong, let's be honest. We have had a question come in regarding the backup.
Of course. Okay.
And so Simon's asked, can Acronis backup from Citrix share file accounts / folders?
The answer is no, unfortunately. We need to be able to have an agent inside a workload, basically, to back that workload up. We are working on cloud-to-cloud technologies as we speak. Obviously, the first iteration of that is pretty much Office 365 and G Suite backup, but in terms of your particular request, at the current time, we can't, I'm afraid. So lastly, then, I suppose I need to finish off with the anti-malware piece. Thank you for the pointing out the question, Chloe. Yeah, just lastly, we've got parameters here, fairly self-explanatory stuff. From a real-time protection perspective, we want that file to go into quarantine, and we can schedule when we do scans as well and where that file goes. If we detect anything, again, it would go into quarantine, and we can determine when that quarantine is emptied, and we can also specify exclusions, so we can exclude services or files and folders, for example. So that's backup. I'm just going to, for the last couple of minutes I've got, I'm going to quickly touch on disaster recovery, because that's pretty much all the time I've got left. I've been talking for far too long. Our disaster recovery solution, all we're doing is leveraging complete machine backups, so an entire machine backup. So if I click on a device in here, for example, so I go to all devices, I click on this fella here, I click on disaster recovery, and create recovery server. I've got a few options here. It's telling me that's the original machine. I can specify how many CPUs and how much RAM I give to that particular disaster recovery server as well. So I'm going to stick with the basic version here, which is a 2 gig server, not very powerful. The networking options, it will automatically know the IP address from your production environment. I can give it a test IP address as well. This enables me to bring it up in a sandbox environment and still communicate with it directly over IP, but obviously there'll be no data going out on its original IP address. We can specify as a web-facing server a public IP address as well. We can even specify RPO thresholds. So this will basically be linked to the backup, and it will know whether that RPO threshold is good, which of course is vital from a disaster recovery perspective. So all I've done there is I've selected a machine that's got an entire machine backup. I've reserved the resource in our cloud, and basically it's just going to complete that activity now, and it will pop up here any second And then what I'll be able to do is actually start that server up and run it in the Acronis cloud. We do have some other options here as well. One is connectivity. What we can do here is we have a small appliance that runs in either Hyper-V or VMware, and that creates a layer 2 connection in between the cloud site, so that's the Acronis site, and the local site. It's very easy to deploy. It's about 500 meg in size and consumes, it's like one CPU and a couple of gig of RAM really. So it's very low consumption, and that's just a layer 2 connection. So when I spin up my workloads in the cloud site, the Acronis cloud, they'll be able to communicate over that layer 2 connection, and they will be able to perform and interact with the environment in a very transparent way. So that's a great way of enabling disaster recovery. And also, should the worst happen, should you, a customer or an end user lose their site, what we can do is we can download and deploy the VPN appliance into a serviced office, for example, or another disaster recovery location. You can even run this on Windows 10 laptops. So that's what I do for my appliance. So it's very, very low consumption, and that will give you a bridge into your network, that layer 2 connection. But if we're talking about users then connecting in from home, how do they get into your environment? Obviously, any VPN, corporate VPN that they may have had would no longer work. But what you can do is just click on this and download an OpenVPN configuration file, and that basically will enable you to create a VPN connection for all those end users, home users, into the Acronis cloud, where they'll be able to communicate with your server estate. And lastly, from a disaster recovery perspective, we have something called runbooks. Runbooks are brilliant, especially when you're talking about larger estates. For those of you familiar with disaster recovery, you'll know that you have to run those servers up in a specific order. Have to obviously run domain controllers first, for example. So you've got a domain for other servers and laptops and end users to log into. So you just click add a step here, add an action, add a failover server. I pick it from my list here. There we are. And then all I do is then add another step here. So this step, the first step is my domain controllers. The second step could be another failover server. So this could be my Exchange or SQL servers, and you can just keep going. And furthermore, you can get really complicated with this, guys. You can embed runbooks within runbooks basically as well. So you can even bring up domain controllers in specified order as well. And you can set parameters around basically when those servers spin up. So if, for example, the domain controller has completed its boot and it's up and running and you can ping it, you'll be able to then commence the running of the next server. And all you need to do is, after you've created that runbook, is then click on the runbook, click on execute, and you've got a choice. You can run it in a test, and that could be an entire IT environment, or it could just be one server. The choice is yours, but it's in either test or production. So the beauty of this is you can basically run a disaster recovery test, and basically with just one click. And another good attribute of this system is that once it's completed, you can actually create a script specifically for testing, for example, that will then shut down all those servers as well. So you'll be able to test your entire estate with little more than a couple of clicks. And that is disaster recovery as well, guys. So I suppose now, Juan, the time is for questions, I guess, if there's any questions left, I think.
Yes, so, sorry, thank you for that, Damon. We have had another question come in asking if in our Acronis setup, the anti-malware protection and vulnerability assessment are off. Is this a setup error we need to fix, or an add-on service that we need to pay in addition to?
That's a very good question. The anti-malware piece basically is basically within our CyberProtect version. So we have, if it's backup, standard, advanced, or disaster recovery edition in standalone, so without cyber protection, the CyberProtect add-on, you will have vulnerability assessment in there and active protection only, and active protection being the anti-ransomware technology and crypto mining technology. If you need the full cyber protection suite, so the anti-malware piece, the vulnerability assessment and patch management, because you'll get vulnerability assessment in the base versions, but you will obviously have to then go away and patch yourself. But if you want patch management and URL filtering and so on, you will need the CyberProtect version, and that will give you all of the options on the right-hand side, basically. So And a short answer to the question is yes, you need to speak to these guys and get that upgrade, basically, that CyberProtect upgrade.
Yeah, so following on from that, I'll pass your question along to your account manager, Simon, and he'll reach out to you to discuss that further offline. That's not a problem. But if anyone else does have any other questions regarding the backup solution that Damon shared today or anything else outside of the demonstration, please feel free to either use your voice functionality or just type it into the chat box to your right hand side. I think we've got a couple of minutes left before the end of the webinar if anyone does have any questions. But in the meantime, I'd just like to say thank you to Damon and Juan for joining us today, and thank you for that in-depth demonstration, Damon. That was really helpful. Thank you.
My pleasure, guys.
Thanks, Chloe. It looks like no more questions, Chloe. I just wanted to add to that. Obviously, we work very closely with Cobweb. They're very technically proficient and able, and I'm sure they can help you with any questions you may have. However, if there's anything that you need from us, obviously via your account manager at Cobweb, please feel free to reach out to us, and we can either set up an individual call or answer any questions as you see fit.
Yes, and especially if some of you have already joined the webinar this morning or joined our web security webinar later today, we are doing a sort of a special offer, a security special offer regarding some of the tools and topics that have been shared today about backup and web security. So please keep an eye out in your inbox. I'm not going to give any spoilers away as to what that offer is. So please keep an eye in your inbox and you'll get an email about it either later today or tomorrow morning. But if we don't have any more questions, I think we shall call it there then. So once again, thank you, Juan. Thank you, Damon, for joining us today. And I hope everyone else enjoys the rest of their day. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, guys. Bye.